That was, and that accident, after Dale's accident, sparked a whole new revolution in.
For years, people have believed they already knew what happened on one fateful day, the day Dale Earnhardt lost his life on the final lap of the Daytona 500. The story seemed straightforward: a light contact, a sudden crash, and a tragedy that stunned the racing world. But some details never fully lined up, and questions have followed that moment ever since. And now at 67, Sterling Marlin, the driver closest to the crash, has finally broken his silence. What did he see in those last seconds, and why did he stay quiet for so long? Let's find out. The final lap. The closing stretch of the 2001 Daytona 500 was intense, fast, and carefully controlled. The cars were running close together, the pack was tight, and every movement on the track carried pressure. Dale Earnhardt was not racing to win the checkered flag that afternoon. Instead, he was working to protect the two cars ahead of him, driven by Michael Waltrip and his son, Dale Earnhardt Jr., who were leading the race. His role in those last moments was defense, holding his position so they could reach the finish line safely. The number 3 car stayed in third place, while the field began to close from behind. Sterling Marlin was one of the drivers near Earnhardt, both moving at high speed through the final turns. At Daytona, this part of the track demanded balance and stability, because even a slight shift in air pressure or contact between cars could change the line and affect control. Drivers later explained that, at speeds like these, the car responds to the slightest touch, and precision becomes everything. Earnhardt continued to block and protect the lead cars, relying on experience, timing, and instinct. The gap narrowed again as the pack moved toward turn 4, and the space between vehicles became almost invisible. Then, there was a light contact. It did not appear dramatic or violent from a distance, but at that speed, even the slightest movement could influence the car's direction. Many fans later wondered the same thing. How could something that looked so minor lead to such serious consequences? In the next seconds, the energy on the track shifted, and what seemed ordinary at first began to feel far more uncertain. The impact. That uncertainty on the track grew as the cars reached turn 4, and what first looked normal slowly began to reveal how fragile the situation really was. At that speed, even a small change in the car's angle or balance can create a chain of reactions, and that is what happened in those final seconds. The slight contact from behind shifted Dale Earnhardt's car just enough to change the direction of its front wheels, and the vehicle began to move toward Ken Schrader's car beside him. The two cars touched side to side, and that contact sent both vehicles toward the outside wall. Earnhardt's car hit the wall almost straight on, which is dangerous because the force does not spread across the vehicle and instead travels directly through the driver's seat and body. The speed at that moment was more than 160 miles per hour, which meant the impact was sudden and extremely strong. From the stands and on television, the crash did not look as violent as other wrecks people had seen before. There was no rolling, no fire, and no dramatic spin across the track. The car slid down the banking and came to rest in the infield grass beside Schrader's car, prompting many viewers to assume he would step out in a few moments, as drivers often did after accidents. But inside the car, the force of the impact had already done its damage. Later reports explained that the hit created massive pressure on the upper part of his body and skull. At that time, NASCAR had not yet made the Hans device, a head and neck support system, mandatory. Many drivers, including Earnhardt, did not use it because it felt restrictive, even though it was designed to protect against precisely this type of injury. The concrete wall also had no soft barrier system, such as the safer barriers used today, so it did not absorb much energy. Almost all of it went back into the car and the driver. This combination of speed, angle, lack of head support, and rigid wall structure turned what looked like a minor crash into a fatal impact. And as the cars came to a stop and the track fell quiet, what happened next raised even more questions. The silence. Those questions began as soon as the two cars came to rest in the infield grass, because from the outside everything still looked calm and controlled, and there were no signs that something serious had happened. Ken Schrader climbed out of his own car and walked toward Dale Earnhardt's car to check on him, which was common after a crash, since drivers often made sure the other person was all right before safety crews arrived. But when Schrader looked out the window, his reaction changed, making people nearby realize the situation was not normal, and he signaled urgently for medical help instead of speaking. Emergency teams reached the car quickly and began working inside the vehicle, while the race continued to its finish, as the accident occurred on the final lap. To many people watching, it still appeared routine, since there was no fire or visible damage that suggested a life-threatening injury. But inside the car, medical staff realized that the impact had already caused severe internal trauma, and treatment became focused on resuscitation and rapid transport. Earnhardt was taken to Halifax Medical Center, where doctors tried to revive him using emergency procedures that are standard in high-impact crash cases. Despite these efforts, the injuries were too severe to survive, and a short time later, the hospital confirmed that he had passed away from blunt force trauma to the head. The official autopsy later explained that the skull fracture happened at the exact moment of the wall impact, which meant the fatal injury occurred instantly and was not something that developed later at the hospital. When the news was announced, the speedway became quiet, and many fans struggled to understand how a crash that appeared mild on television could result in death. This confusion led to debate about safety systems, equipment choices, and track barriers, because the incident did not match what people expected based on how the wreck looked. NASCAR soon began reviewing the accident in detail and studying every factor that contributed to the impact, including restraint systems, cockpit forces, and wall design, to understand precisely why the injury occurred and how future drivers could be protected from similar outcomes. At the same time, public attention slowly shifted toward the drivers who had been closest to the crash, and that new focus created a different kind of pressure that would grow in the days ahead, raising questions that did not fade away easily. Breaking the truth. As attention slowly shifted toward the drivers who were near the crash, more focus began to fall on Sterling Marlin, since his car had made slight contact with Dale Earnhardt just before the impact. Many people who were grieving wanted answers, and some began to believe that the contact itself was the cause, even though early reviews showed it was a regular part of pack racing. Marlin explained that he was holding his racing line and did not intend to cause harm. But the public reaction was still tricky. He received intense criticism and hurtful messages, which made the loss even heavier for him, because he was also affected by what he had seen on the track that day. Other drivers and NASCAR officials later reviewed the footage and stated that the contact alone did not cause the fatal injury. The real problem was the force of the impact, the lack of head support equipment at the time, and the hard concrete wall that did not absorb energy. Because of this, Marlin chose to remain quiet for many years, out of respect for the Earnhardt family and the pain surrounding the event. But that silence also meant he carried the weight of that moment privately. The aftermath. Because Sterling Marlin carried that memory quietly for so many years, the focus during that time shifted more toward what could be learned from the accident than toward who was at fault. NASCAR used the investigation results to improve safety, and these changes slowly became standard across the sport. The Hans device was made mandatory to ensure a driver's head and neck remained supported during a sudden impact, reducing the type of injury that occurred in this crash. Racetracks also added safer barriers that absorb more of the force when a car hits the wall. This meant less energy was returned to the driver, especially in high-speed turns. Car interiors were strengthened with better seats, stronger belts, and improved safety frames so that the force of a crash would spread more evenly through the vehicle instead of into the driver's body. Over the years, many drivers said these changes helped save lives in later accidents, and they often traced those improvements back to lessons learned from this moment in history. When Marlin eventually spoke more openly, he said he hoped that what came from that tragic day made the sport safer for everyone who continued to race after him. Dale Earnhardt's final race did more than mark a tragedy. It changed safety, guided new rules, and protected countless drivers who came after him. Sterling Marlin's words remind us that moments of loss can still shape progress, even when the truth takes years to be spoken. His story and Dale's legacy continue to live on in every safer lap that follows. I hope you liked this video. Make sure you give it a thumbs up. Also, consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already, because we will be uploading more crazy stories like this one in the coming weeks. Until then, see ya.